Good evening, folks. Triple Crown here, coming to you from Vancouver, British Columbia. It is Friday evening, and I'm excited to be doing another video for you. This topic of tonight is going to be a conclusion of the solo Global War 1939 series playtest that I did. And thank you for everybody who watched, who commented, who liked, and who shared the video with other people. So thank you to the community for your support and comments. And why I just wanted to talk about why I wanted to do this video series before the game is released. And the biggest thing for me is I feel this game does not belong to me, that this game belongs to the community. And I wanted to put it out there to you guys because I want to get this right. I want to fix as many of the quirks or little things that are going to be discovered along the way so that in 3 or 6 months or after the game is released, there will be, I'm not going to expect there's not going to be some or something that comes up, but eliminate as many of the hiccups and problems as possible. And in saying this game belongs in the community and belongs to you guys, if there's something in these videos that you feel or you see is not right, please speak up, and I will do my absolute best. I promise to you that I will engage in the conversation back with you. I can't promise I'm going to change something because you don't like it, but let's have that discussion. I would like to hear where you're coming from, your perspective, and other people to comment. And maybe I'm not right. Maybe if 6 people or more are saying this needs to be in a certain way, then I'm not stubborn enough to say, hey, this is my game. I'm not going to change it. So just wanted to put that out there. Now, is the game ready yet? How soon is it? Well, the biggest priority for me at this point, or at least for Doug and Historical Board Gaming, is having a game where we feel that we have it right. So in a perfect world, the game we're satisfied with it and it comes out ready for purchase, before the summer. That is called that ambitious, maybe not, but that is my goal at this point. But again, I will keep everybody in the loop and be transparent about things, so there's no surprises. Now you can see here, this is I just want to talk about, first of all, is one of the things that the biggest issues I had with so far playing the game wasn't the game itself. It was more to do with the amount of new units that I've added and the space on the map. Now I use the smaller map, and I do find in some of the territories or sea zones or whatever it is that when you're putting in a lot of stuff, that I was currently using the chits. This is what I was using before. They don't lie flat, and sometimes they just bump and they get moved and you lose track of where they are. In naval bases in this game, it's really important to know what land territory they belong to. Sometimes it makes a big difference, especially if you're to get into Italy. I'm just going to pan over here. And you need to know sometimes where everything is. You need to know that, hey, in talking about Tobruk, that this is where the naval base is. That when you're talking about Italy, is it in the naval base? Is it in Sicily or is it in Taranto? Now, most of us know that it's in Taranto, but something that I discovered that I did not even realize, because once I get all of the stuff on the board, all of the navies, and you can see the large scale of the navies in this game, that I did not even realize, folks, that in Sea Zone 40, that Italy does not have a naval base. Well, who cares? That's not a big deal. Well, it actually is, because if your goal is to attack Cairo, now let me back out for a second. you can only move 2 spaces. 1, 2. You can only get to Tobruk. But if you're building navy here in the sea zone west of Rome, you can go 3 because there's a naval base in Turin. You can go 1, 2, 3. So does that mean if your objective is to take Cairo and your opponent knows it, you're going to be building stuff here? And if you don't, if you see your opponent building stuff here, well, you know they're not coming for Cairo on the following turn. So that is significant. I believe there's some historical accuracies to the reason why that, you know, Rome or Italy did not have a lot of naval bases or naval, you know, the ability to have big ships along the eastern coast of Italy. And that's why I think in even other series, you see that, you know, basically it's the western area of Italy where you see the larger naval ports. So historically that is right. I have added some naval bases, and I'll just quickly get into that. I did add one, for example, you know, Spain had a large navy here. Well, it makes sense. They have a naval base over here in Azores, and Azores was actually a hotly fought over island in the Second World War. The Americans wanted it, the Germans wanted it, and the reason was because there was airfields there and there was also a naval base there. So they wanted to add those to, you know, bring Azores, which is a Portuguese territory, into the game. Now, why the Germans might want it, if there's a naval base there, well, is because Argentina is a pro-Axis territory, and you know, if the Germans capture it, well, that is a huge bonus for them. And if there's a naval base there, well, all of a sudden they are now 3 spaces away from Argentina. So that is a nice little nugget for them if they're able to do it. But the Americans, and I did some research on this, the Americans actually had a special agreement with the Portuguese, and this is a rule in the game that I haven't talked about yet, is they were allowed to land, you know, they had these called hidden air bases in Azores, and America actually used them in World War II without, you know, declaring war on anybody. So this is similar to how the Germans can go into Sweden without declaring war on them and sort of non-com in and walk through. Historically, that's accurate. So wanted to, you know, make that accurate as well. So just to talk about that. Now, some people like to use these, which are these nice 3D printed sculpts, which this game is a very, very visual game. And the whole purpose of these game aids or whatever they are is to make it easier for you to be able to play the game. That is the whole purpose. It's not fancy. It doesn't matter what you use. Other people might have their preferences. I'm not telling you have to use this. You have to use whatever. It's just going to be up to each individual person to decide. Now, these 3D printed sculpts, they are more expensive, and these little chits aren't cheap either. Probably the least expensive option, I think they're about $3 or $4 for a card, and 2.5 cards for each naval and air base, so 5 total. We did the entire map, and I have fat fingers. I'm not good at putting on stickers, and if you're putting these on and you get it a little bit wrong, there is some give. You can peel them back up and put them somewhere else. So in terms of ease of use, these are great. And my thoughts were, because there is a scorched earth, that say this is a territory belonging to the Americans, and they see the Germans coming, and they say, we're going to scorched earth you guys, so you can't have access. Well, I'm going to, in terms of are you going to peel the decal off? Or I'm just going to say, just to remember, you can use these chits, for example, and flip them upside down and just put them over top to signal that, hey, these are burned bases. Now, there might be another suggestion somebody else has, so please let me know what that is. So just wanted to get that out of the way, and I think these stickers on the map, they really pop. I have added a lot of air and naval bases to the French territories of Normandy, into Reims, into Bordeaux, into Marseille. And that's because I find as players play this games, And now with the D-Day invasion happening with a special bonus to the Allies, the Germans are going to be smart. A smart Axis player is not going to be leaving anybody at all along the western coast. Well, I didn't want that. And if Germany has to spend 15 IPP per air base to put them there, they're just not going to do it. And France did have a lot of air bases, and they also had naval bases. So to me, it makes sense they're there to give the Germans a little boost for two reasons. One is for their submarines to be able to have reach into the Atlantic, because I want this battle to be ongoing throughout the game. And it's just very difficult for the Germans, once they only have submarines left, to sort of force their way into the Atlantic. So but also you can see here there's two air bases here. Now, why the Germans are at a disadvantage in defending Western Europe is probably the biggest reason is that United States is only 3 zones away from doing a landing in either Normandy or in Bordeaux. And if America has transports in the water and they're able to drop off, let's just say 10 units, well, why would the Germans try and defend these territories? If the British are allowed to do a joint invasion with them, they're going to back away. Well, maybe if there's 2 air bases here and they have 6 fighters, now they have the option of a double scramble. So I want to encourage the Germans to, because they're probably not going to be spending 30 on 2 air bases while trying to push into Moscow at the same time. And is it unlikely they do that? But for a smaller invasion, say America only has 1 or 2 transports in the water, well, now all of a sudden these are going to keep the Americans more honest, these air bases. So that's a little addition I've added. Now, sometimes when you write things down in a rule book and you say them, and you really want to put them in a position where others are going to be able to interpret them, but others are not going to be able to find a loophole somewhere and break the rules. And when I'm playing the game as a playtester by myself, I'm sometimes at a disadvantage because I don't necessarily always think of creatively as others do, and because I help edit and amend some of the rules, that I know what the intent of the rule is. Now, what the intent of the rule might be completely interpreted in a different way from other people. Now in the game that we just played, Germany did send I recall about 5 submarines from the Atlantic into the sea zone off of Canada. I think it's sea zone 21. So 5 submarines were attacking a Canadian destroyer and transport. And I just wanted to, now submarine warfare is probably the most confusing in the game. Now a lot of people get it wrong. A lot of people in more bigger battles do have to reference the rule book, and that's okay. But the surprise strike, that the submarines possess, basically, I just wanted to clarify so there's no confusion. So now, a destroyer can see 2 submarines. So in this scenario of attack, it can see these 2 submarines. Now, but this also means that these other 3 submarines get a surprise strike. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean these submarines can sneak around the destroyer and wipe out the transports? Well, transports have to be taken last, but they are still subject to the surprise strike. So I just wanted to clarify that in a scenario where this battle happens, that the destroyer has to be taken first as a casualty, regardless of the surprise strike, if that makes sense. So I'm just gonna quickly roll that out for you. So I really want people to not debate about one of these rules, because it can be interpreted 6 ways from Sundays depending on how it's written. So I wanted to do another. So let's just say the submarines, that 5 of them are attacking at 5, the destroyer is the 5, and the transport is a 2. So let's just say, for example, the 3, they get the surprise strike, roll first, because they sneak around. Now they get 2. Now the first casualty has to be the destroyer. So the destroyer, we know, is taken out. Now destroyers, in referencing the rule book, always get to return fire. So that's how that happens. So it's not like they're walking around or skirting around the destroyer to have a free shot at the transport. So, and then you would roll the remaining 2 submarines in the attack, and it's a miss. So the destroyer's gone, but it does get to return fire. And that's 2 misses. Now transports are at a 1, so now the destroyer's gone, and now there is 5 remaining submarines taking on 1 naval transport. Now the 5 submarines get a surprise strike, which means if they get a hit, that the transport does not get to return fire. And they rolled a 1, so that battle is over. So I just wanted to clarify that, folks, because again, now if there's something here that you don't see or you don't like, please comment, because this is something that I want to get right. So it's not a Saturday afternoon where people are, having this big discussion or big debate. Another rule that I wanted to simplify was the rocket attack. Now, this is probably one of the rules that I had the most difficulty trying to get into the game, but trying to make it simple. Currently, I had it written that it cost 10 IPP for the Germans to have the technology. I found that was a little bit expensive, so as of now, I've changed it. So basically, it's automatic. The Germans are going to get the technology as soon as the Allies do a landing in Western Europe, excluding Norway. So it would either be, Reims, Normandy, Bordeaux, or Western Germany. So I was using these little guys, these flat-bottomed V1s, to sort of purchase their 1 IPP each. So the Germans will still be able to purchase these for 1 IPP each. But I wanted to simplify how this works. So been talking with Doug, and a lot of the themes, or it seems like now he has the ability to 3D, to do this amazing printing on these dice, is to use dice for this instead. So you'd be purchasing 3 dice at 1 IPP each, and instead of being a 12D, it would be a 6D. And somebody brought up a comment that, well, what if the Germans are doing an attack and there's no naval or air base? So I wanted to simplify this process. So what I'm going to say is that if the Germans declare, so they purchase the 3 dice, they put them on the territory, we're attacking London, we're attacking Liverpool, and we are attacking, say, Leningrad. Okay, let's just say they chose those 3 targets. Okay, so that's how that works. At the start of your turn, you purchase the dice. They have to be used, so you declare those territories. Now, if you roll a 1, so you're declaring an attack on London, you roll a 1, the Germans, we're saying they get to select the target, whether it being a ground unit, whether it be 2 damage applied to an industrial complex, an air base, or a naval base. They get to choose. That doesn't mean they get to choose the actual unit that's taken. That's still up to the British, but they get to say that we want one hit to be applied towards a ground-based unit, or 2 damage points applied to an industrial complex. Now, if the Germans roll a 2, we're going to say the defender gets to select whatever happens. So they say, well, we're going to lose an infantry as a ground unit. We're going to apply 2 damage to a factory, or we're going to apply 2 damage to an air or a naval base. Okay, and if you roll a 3 to a 6, we're just going to say that is a miss. So I think this kind of cleans up that process. I found it was a little bit clunky. It's something that I was never happy with. And so what Doug's going to be doing is he's going to be making dice specifically for the rocket, like rocket dice, we're going to call them. and it'll be, the one it'll just say attacker selects. If you roll a 2, it'll say defender selects, and the other side of the dice will just be blank, so that'll be a miss. So that is that point. Also, in terms of, are there any new units that I wanted to bring up? Well, I talked about Paris or France being a little bit of a weak point because the closeness of 3 Z zones to America. And the Japanese currently have this little pillbox, right? They have this pillbox, which I recall they're allowed to build 1 per territory. It applies an automatic hit to be applied to attacking ground units during round 1 of combat. So it's not a lot, but it's something. But these sculpts, I didn't want to use. I wanted to use something that was historical. So the rules for these are going to be the same, but instead, because I just think they're such a cool sculpt and they need to be in the game, is a hedgehog. So you could use these because they're going to have the same purpose as a bunker, but basically along these territories, along the west coast of Europe, if the Germans want to build, they're going to be allowed to build 1 hedgehog per territory, and it's those structures on the beach that you see in Saving Private Ryan. And Doug's going to have a 3D sculpt, and it's just basically going to be the same thing as this. So the same rule, but in terms of the visually, that's what I'm going to use. If you want to use a little bunker, it's not going to be much, but it's just going to help the Germans defend the west coast of Europe, and it's going to encourage them maybe to spend some money there with the addition of having a coastal gun. So wanted to clarify that. And also something else I wanted to clarify was the naval fighter and torpedo bomber, this target select. Now I said something in the video that I thought about after, and right when I said it, I knew instantly that it did not sound right. So, and I think the intent of the rule in the original game, because this was in the original game, was you would just roll all of your naval aircraft, and if you rolled a bunch of 2s, you would say, well, then you wouldn't pre-select your casualty. Well, I wanted to change that so that basically the target is pre-selected. And I think this is historically accurate. I'm going to get into another scenario here why what I said initially was wrong, and I wanted to clarify. So I wanted this to be similar to in BBR how the target select is applied. So imagine Japan sitting in the C zone here, 132, 1 C zone away from the west coast of San Francisco, and they have what I call a target-rich environment. Now, those who know, I do like the movie Top Gun. It's one of my favorite movies. So the Japanese have 2 carriers, a cruiser and a destroyer. Well, the Americans probably don't care about the destroyer and the cruiser. And maybe the aircraft carriers are a target-rich environment, meaning that if the Americans can score a hit in the C zone, there is no land anywhere where these planes can land. So the Americans want to take out those carriers, and they want to do damage to them. So let's just pretend that America has declared they're sending 3 fighters each after the carriers. Now in the video I said, well, if America rolls 3 hits here, well, does that mean that this one of the extra hits they rolled gets to be applied somewhere else? I'm saying no, it does not. Same as how the mechanics of how it works in BBR. That if you declare that I'm sending these 3 aircraft after this and you score 3 hits, well, good for you, but that does not mean that that extra hit, because it takes 2 hits to sink the carrier, get to applied. So you have to decide, is that what you want to do? So it's a little bit more strategy coming into how you want your target selects to be applied. And it's kind of historical, like, the battle for Midway. the Americans were only after the Japanese carriers. They didn't care about the battleships, they didn't care about the cruisers, they didn't care about the destroyers. And so, does this create a scenario that could be similar? And I wanted this element in the game. Now, if the Americans missed the carrier, or let's just say they couldn't find the carrier, they run the risk. Well, then all of a sudden they basically missed. So America could really do this attack and score 3 hits over here and miss this carrier here, and these guys get to still return fire, the other aircraft and the cruiser and destroyer, and take out the fighters. So it is a risk, and you're going to have to be able to calculate how much of that risk you want if you're the person declaring the target select. So I just wanted to clarify that. Now, those of you who, in addition to the game, and these were all, actually D-Day wasn't really a part of the original rules, but this Japanese sneak attack, and it wasn't called Barbarossa in the original game. It was just called Sleeping Bear or something of that nature. But I've combined the comments from Captain G and Hambone into sort of what the Barbarossa is going to be able to do. And it's currently, I just want to say that how I played it last game is still under development. I'm still going to play test it some more, so it's not final. But as of now, the Germans are going to still have three of the called attacks where the Russians defend at -1 and the Germans are a +1, and the 5 tactical bombers get to have first strike on the first round of combat. So they could go in 2 territories. So if they're here in Romania, they can go 1, 2 in eastern Ukraine and come back. Now, why I wanted to give this a little bit more pop for the Germans is because a good Russian player is going to leave a token infantry on the front, essentially negating the Barbarossa. And I didn't want that. I didn't want people to be able to game it. So if the Russian player wants to still leave a token guy here, and now it's going to make them really think twice about what they have in reserve as defense. Are they going to want to have a stack of guys there or not? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Well, if they decide to back them up 3 territories away, well, now the only thing they can reach on the following turn for a sneak attack is a unit that can move 2 spaces or an aircraft. So it's going to be a little bit more scheming. It's not going to be as easy for the Russians to negate the Barbarossa attack. And really, 5 aircraft, if they're rolling at I think they're going to be rolling at a +1 because it's a Barbarossa. Are you going to score 3 hits? So these guys are probably going to score on average of 3 hits. This isn't game changing, but it's a little wrinkle. Makes it a little bit, I think, nicer for the Germans. And I really wanted the 3 big missions in Global War 1939, the Tora Tora Tora, the Japanese sneak attack, the Barbarossa, and the D-Day landings for the Allies to be special. And if it takes you a few minutes to have to refresh yourself on the rules, but sort of your strategy is based upon those historical events in time, I think this is really special, and I think it adds to the game, and I think it's worth adding to the game. So, for me, when I learned this game, the Japanese sneak attack was just something that really sold me on it. So hopefully with these additions, it's going to add to that. And something I meant to mention earlier in the video was, with the amount of new units in the game, I've had this comment from people that are in the playtesting group is, well, how do we know if you're the Allies what the Germans are going to have? Like, how do we know what a Tiger tanks? That's going to be very difficult for us to try to remember. Well, I don't want anybody to have to remember. So what we're going to do, and I don't have them printed up, is there's going to be a cheat sheet. a cheat sheet that you're going to have as the allied player that's going to just be a little card that's going to show you all of the special units the Axis have for a reference. It's going to show you Tiger Tank, Panzer V, ME-262, and it's going to be a quick reference point. And if you're the allies, well, it probably makes sense that each allied player has one as a reference when they're planning their strategy. So that is going to be something that's added into the game. So just so you know, you're not going to have to remember, the attack value of all these specialized units. And there's going to be some similarities. For example, like light tanks across the board are generally going to have the same attack and defense value and cost. But occasionally certain nations might have a little wrinkle here and there. So wanted to just mention that to everybody. The other thing that I'm still wanting to play through was when the Allies capture Rome. Now, the two questions I still want to put out there to the community is what do you think should happen to the industrial complex in Rome? Should it be downgraded? Should it remain the same? Or what should happen to it? So that is something that I still, currently it's downgraded, but I just want to make sure that makes sense. The other part is, on the following turn, meaning like the next round, Italy will be going the same time as the UK. Essentially, they are the UK. But currently, Italy would be going after the UK in this round, so to speak. So does Italy still get their turn this round? So if they had, because they're going to have their money to spend, because the money doesn't go to the UK or say the Americans, it stays in Italian hands, is do they get to spend their money this round? Do they get to do a non-combat movement, or do they get to attack? So I wanted to, basically get these rules right and what makes sense. So currently, I think what makes sense is Italy gets to do their purchase this round, and they get to do non-combat movements, but on the following subsequent round. So say Italy falls on, say it's turn 8. Well, that on round 8, they still get to do their purchases after the Rome is captured, but on turn 9, then they are going with the British. But on turn 8, they only get to do purchases and non-combat movements. They do not get to do attacks. So I just wanted to clarify that. And I also found that basically, if a lot of these territories flip into Italian hands, that probably that means now Turkey is going to become pro-Axis, and that is a huge swing for the Allies. So how do I balance that? Well, does it make sense that Italy is able to have their NOs still going forward in the game? And I think as of now, I'm leaning towards no, because I think it's a little bit too powerful. They're going to be making already 26 if they have most of their territories. And if you add in the NOs and you add in Turkey, well, all of a sudden, they add in the bonus 15 additional units from Turkey and a Navy. That's just, it's too much if Italy is all of a sudden making 30 or 40 IPP. And I wanted Italy to have the purchase, have the ability to purchase units on the turn that is captured, is because simply the Germans are going to be doing probably a sneak attack or a counterattack. So that is why I thought of having the rule that way. So let me know what you think about those three things that I'm still not 100% decided on. And I think that is most of the in terms of rules or housekeeping items that I wanted to address. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the strategy in the game, and is the game balanced? Personally, and everyone can have their own opinion, and if half the people are saying the game is Axis favored and half the people are saying the game is Allied favored, well, and that's not a bad thing. That means maybe it is. But I still feel in this game that the strongest player, the best strategist, is probably going to win majority of the games. When I play Gargantua, it doesn't matter what nation I'm playing. I know he's going to win the game. I'm not even giving myself a 5% chance. He's that good. And the same with Hilltop Hillbox. When I play him, I get all excited because he beat me last time when he was the Axis, and now I'm playing the Axis, so I'm going to have the advantage. Well, nope. Hilltop Pillbox is still going to dominate me when he's the ally. So that leads me to believe that the game is somewhat balanced. I'm not seeing scenarios where the allies are winning most of the games or the Axis are. Mind you, you guys might be doing strategies that I'm not. And there is a fairly big variance game to game, which could assist one side more than the other. The first one of those is the Vichy thing, rolling for territories, rolling for ships. If the Axis are inheriting, 5 or 6 ships, and the Allies, 1 or 2, and the Axis are inheriting a whole bunch of territories, like we learned last game how important Syria was. Well, those are swings, and they do impact subsequent rounds later on. Everything has an effect. And another big swing that's different from game to game is rolling for the Russian and the American economies. If you're rolling, 1s or 2s and 3s and 4s, you might be in trouble that game. But just because you roll poorly in round 1 and round 2, round 3 you could be rolling 2 12s and get up to 24. So does it balance out? But there is going to be games where one side is going to be sort of behind the 8 ball based on dice, and I like it this way. I think it adds the fun. I think it adds how each game can be slightly different. So as of now, we're going to keep that. Now, I did talk about strategy a little bit in the round 15, and I still feel that the Axis, in terms of decisiveness, if they are going to win the game, that Moscow, if Moscow is able to hold, that seems to be a big thing. Now, the Lend-Lease is another variable that plays into that, but what I've learned playing this game is how much easier it is to defend. And my rule of thumb that I've learned, if there's a fortification, let's just say it's in Moscow, and you are attacking, or the defenders have 30 plus units, or probably more like 40, that if you're going to be successful as the attacker because they have a fortification, you need to be coming in with at least 10 more units attacking. So if they have 40 defending, for you to be successful, you need to be coming in with at least 50. Now, I like this disparity because historically it's easier to defend than it is to attack, and Russia's not making a lot of money, so Germany needs to come in with overwhelming odds. Now, sometimes the dice are hot or cold, but on average, that is my experience. If you're coming in with even units, or if they're defending at 45 or 40 and you're coming in with 45, that is a very, very risky proposition. And I've lost so many times when I've tried to capture Moscow with 45 units, for example, and they're defending with 40, and I've lost. And it all comes down to the round 1. You might lose, say 17 or 18 units attacking, and you might only be able to have damage, say 8 or 9 casualties. Well, now all of a sudden you're at a disadvantage going into round 2. So I've seen that scenario play out many times, but I just wanted to point that out. And also how the Axis need to be aggressive, but also be able to work together. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, sometimes, for example, let's just pretend that Germany is putting a couple transports in the water, so all of a sudden Sea Lion is a threat. Well, America, are they going to ignore that? Are they going to go full Pacific and ignore what is happening in the Atlantic? They cannot. So they have to build. So sometimes Germany needs to be able to do things like this to help Japan out. Now, last game, I did reference that Japan had all this money, and if they were able to, get some more fast movers and more ground units in the continent of Asia and put pressure on Russia, they probably could have had worked more with the Germans as sort of a 1-2 punch and be able to go after Moscow. Also, a lot of resources went into Cairo. A lot of resources. I think Germany had lost 14 units going after Cairo, and they were expensive units. It was a big waste. Now, if those units and some more Italian units had been up here on the Eastern Front, I wonder what would have happened, in particular if the Japanese were coming. Now, you can say this is all fancy and this is going to work as a scenario. Well, not necessarily, because and I do find that it's a yin and a yang. You go this way, and the Allies do something a little bit different as well. So, but that, just in my opinion, those are some of the tactical errors that I would have changed from last game. So, what's going forward, or what do we have in the future? Well, I plan to be attending the BBR St. Louis 3 tournament. Last year, Detroit was my partner, and we are the defending gold medal champions. So that is a big, scary task. Cyrud is also my partner. He's my partner for Atlanta. So going into St. Louis, our team is going to be Detroit, Cyrud, and myself. So we are preparing for that. We're going to be doing a game against Hambone and VK Cowboy and G.I. Joe, probably 3 of the best world-class BBR players. So I'm going to be having a little bit of a break, but I'm not going to be ignoring 39, but I'm going to be doing the odd video from here and there. But Hilltop Pillbox and myself, because we love to talk strategy, we are going to be doing a YouTube game coming up, another one, something similar to what I've done, with some of the changes that I've just talked about. And we don't want you to be, watching dice. We're going to try and do a Cole's Notes version highlighting key things that are happening. So the tentative plan for that is February. At that point in time, I'm sure there's going to be some more videos that come out, and maybe some comments that people in this group make. So not everything is written in stone. And I think, I remember in closing here, and why I say this game belongs to the community is, I'm a hockey fan. I live in Vancouver. I'm a Vancouver Canucks fan. I remember, when I was young, there was a family that owned the Vancouver Canucks named the Griffiths family. And them talking about, how they were the owners of the Vancouver Canucks, but the Vancouver Canucks team belonged to the community. And decisions that they made weren't in their interest. They were always looking after the fans first. And so I really wanted to transcend that to me being, one of the game designers or redevelopers for 39, is that I really want to leave that impression with you guys that this is your game. So that's all I have in closing, folks. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for some Global War 1939 content coming up soon.